August 6th, 2025. The peaceful skies over Sambir, just 15 miles from the NATO border, suddenly burst into flames. Russia had launched 3 Iskander ballistic missiles and a barrage of 53 suicide drones, a strike package worth more than $120 million, all aimed at a single Ukrainian base. If the attack had succeeded, more than 4,000 troops, along with vital fuel supplies and command systems, could have been wiped out in minutes. At first, it seemed unstoppable. The drones roared across the horizon at 120 miles, clinging to the treetops, while the ballistic missiles plummeted from the stratosphere at Mach 6. But Ukraine was prepared. Hidden radar arrays tracked every trajectory, part of a carefully crafted battle plan over weeks. At the moment of impact, Ukraine's defenses went into action. Bayonet drone interceptors swooped into the swarm of UAVs, tearing them apart in mid-air. Patriot PAC-3 missiles were launched from the ground, shooting down the incoming warheads in spectacular fireballs. This was followed by a bold counterattack order from a Ukrainian general, one that even surprised NATO commanders. Could Ukraine really have stopped the Russian attack? And what was the bold counterattack plan that shocked NATO? Stay tuned, because you're about to find out. 6:15 a.m., August 6th, 2025. The skies over western Ukraine, near the town of Yavoriv, less than 15 miles from the Polish and NATO border, suddenly shook with the roar of jet engines and distant explosions. Russia had expanded its offensive campaign, launching a devastating strike aimed directly at one of Ukraine's most strategic military bases, a vital training and logistics hub where thousands of soldiers were gathered in preparation for the summer counteroffensive. Within less than 3 minutes, Ukrainian radar stations recorded 53 suicide drones launched from 3 directions: southern Belarus, Russia's Bryansk region, and the occupied Donetsk territories. These UAVs flew at an average speed of 120 mph, skimming just 200-300 feet above the ground to evade radar detection. Simultaneously, from Iskander launchers stationed in Kursk, Russia fired 3 short-range ballistic missiles, each carrying a warhead equivalent to half a ton of TNT, aimed straight at the Yavoriv base. If successful, the entire area would be engulfed in fire, with potential casualties numbering in the thousands. But Ukraine was no longer the same. Within 90 seconds of detection, the Bayonet drone interceptor, a next-generation UAV designed specifically for aerial combat, took off. Flying in pairs, the bayonets dove into the Russian drone formation, colliding at high speed and triggering directional warheads that obliterated target after target. In just 5 minutes of combat, all 53 Russian UAVs were destroyed. Not a single one breached Ukraine's air defenses. Above, the Patriot PAC-3 launchers roared to life. 3 interceptor missiles streaked skyward, carving white trails across the sky. Seconds later, all 3 Iskander missiles were destroyed at 25,000 feet, their flaming debris scattering harmlessly over empty fields. In the underground command bunker, the Ukrainian general in charge of Western defenses stood tall, his voice ringing out over the loudspeakers. "We are not merely defending. We will turn every Russian attack into their own graveyard." Russia's opening strike, intended to be annihilating, had instead become the first proof that Ukraine's defensive power had been completely transformed. If you were the supreme leader of Ukraine, would you order an immediate, large-scale counterattack? Here's what one Ukrainian general had to say. By August 7th, 2025, 02:01 a.m., the Ukrainian High Command made a decision that stunned even their own frontline units. Instead of launching an immediate large-scale counteroffensive, Ukrainian generals ordered a return to one of the oldest yet most effective strategies in warfare: guerrilla warfare. The order was simple but daring: fight without needing to win. Small units of 3 to 5 soldiers were deployed deep behind enemy lines. Armed only with light anti-armor rockets, silenced rifles, and a handful of explosive charges, their mission was not to conquer, but to terrorize. One night, a Russian supply convoy of 12 trucks carrying fuel was suddenly ambushed near Novovolinsk. Within 90 seconds, 3 vehicles were burning, and the Ukrainians had already disappeared into the forests. At dawn, another strike hit a communications hub, cutting Russian field radios for hours. These raids were not battles. They were psychological knives twisting into the Russian ranks. Every few hours, somewhere across the Western Front, explosions erupted, sniper fire cracked, or a patrol vanished without a trace. Russian soldiers began to fear the silence between engagements more than the actual firefights. By the seventh day, Russian formations had collapsed into paranoia. Drone footage showed entire platoons refusing to leave their trenches at night, while others fired wildly into the dark, wasting ammunition on phantoms. The toll was devastating. Ukrainian intelligence estimated that 60% of Russia's combat effectiveness in the sector had been neutralized, not through direct confrontation, but through exhaustion, confusion, and fear. What had begun as a calculated gamble by Ukrainian commanders was now turning into a masterpiece of asymmetric warfare. Russia, with all its firepower, suddenly found itself unable to control the battlefield. After small battles will come a full-scale offensive. Support us by liking and subscribing to the channel. Next will be the real power of the Ukrainian army. By August 13, 2025 at 5:40 a.m., after a week of relentless guerrilla strikes, the Ukrainian president authorized a full-scale counteroffensive. The signal was sent from Kiev, and within minutes the skies above western Ukraine came alive with the thunder of engines. From hidden makeshift airstrips and converted farmland, 300 low-cost suicide UAVs lifted off in swarms. Each drone weighed less than 55 pounds, carried a 15-pound explosive charge, and was equipped with a cheap GPS navigation system paired with a small camera. Individually, they were weak, but together they formed a storm. Ukrainian engineers had designed them in under 24 hours using 3D printed frames, commercial lithium batteries, and off-the-shelf processors. The philosophy was simple: overwhelm Russia's defenses with quantity, not cost. The swarm approached the Russian base near Sambir, where more than 2,000 Russian soldiers, armored vehicles, and supply depots were concentrated. Russian anti-air systems lit up the sky, launching missiles worth millions of dollars each. But for every drone destroyed, 5 more broke through. Within minutes, fuel depots ignited like volcanoes, artillery positions erupted, and an entire row of T-72 tanks was reduced to twisted steel. Then came the crisis. A cluster of 5 suicide drones malfunctioned, their GPS receivers jammed by Russian electronic warfare. Disoriented, they veered dangerously off course, heading toward a forward Ukrainian artillery battery preparing to fire. Had they struck, over 120 Ukrainian soldiers and 6 self-propelled howitzers could have been annihilated. At the last second, Ukraine's electronic countermeasures, ECCM, activated. Using portable frequency-hopping transmitters, operators regained control of the rogue drones. With a sharp burst of new coordinates, the drones swung back, diving instead into a Russian ammo storage site. The resulting explosion created a fireball visible for 20 miles, saving the Ukrainian artillery and turning disaster into triumph. As the smoke billowed, the second phase began. 30 self-propelled artillery pieces opened fire, launching precision shells guided by drone reconnaissance. The craters ripped through surviving Russian armor, each blast sending shockwaves across the base. Meanwhile, 20 dedicated reconnaissance UAVs circled high above, streaming live data to command posts. Their role was not only to track targets, but also to guide the camera-equipped suicide drones that followed. These drones functioned like hunters, spotting Russian soldiers attempting to regroup, locking on, and diving with pinpoint accuracy. Caught in open fields and trenches, Russian squads were erased in bursts of smoke and shrapnel. Panic set in. Survivors scrambled for cover that no longer existed. By the end of the assault, the once formidable Russian base was a scorched ruin. The near catastrophe of friendly fire drones had been narrowly avoided, but the devastation inflicted on Russia was beyond recovery. Ukraine had turned improvisation and cheap technology into a weapon of absolute destruction. Are you there? The war is not over. The enemy is still there. Watch as Ukraine completely wipes out the surviving soldiers. By August 14, 2025, 6:30 a.m., the battlefield near Sambir was a wasteland of smoke and twisted steel. Black columns rose into the sky from burning Russian depots, the smell of scorched fuel and shattered armor hanging thick in the air. But for Ukraine, the counteroffensive was not yet complete. The drones had broken the enemy, but to truly reclaim territory, boots on the ground had to finish the job. The order was given: advance and cleanse. From camouflage positions, 10 Ukrainian tanks rolled forward, their engines roaring like metallic beasts. These were modernized T-64s upgraded with advanced fire control systems. Guided by live coordinates from overhead UAVs, the tanks unleashed their 125mm cannons into Russian strongpoints that drones could not reach. Each shot shook the earth, collapsing bunkers and tearing apart machine gun nests hidden in tree lines. Russian soldiers who had escaped the drone storm now found their hiding places turned into death traps. Close behind, 15 armored trucks thundered across the ruined fields, carrying 550 elite Ukrainian infantrymen. They were special operations troops, battle-hardened, silent, and deadly. Once inside the shattered Russian perimeter, they dismounted swiftly, splitting into squads that spread like shadows across the smoldering base. Their mission: eliminate resistance and capture any valuable intelligence. Overhead, miniature quadcopter drones no larger than a backpack hovered, their infrared cameras sweeping the rubble. These drones provided real-time data, detecting heat signatures of Russian soldiers hiding in dugouts or beneath collapsed buildings. When the screen lit up with movement, infantry squads moved in without hesitation. A handful of grenades, a burst of rifle fire, and the position went silent. The Russians tried to resist. At one warehouse, nearly 40 surviving troops attempted to form a defensive line with heavy machine guns. But before they could coordinate, a swarm of loitering mini-drones dove from above, each carrying a small explosive. The entire structure erupted in fire, silencing the last organized attempt at defense. In the forest edge to the west, scattered groups of Russian soldiers attempted to escape. UAVs tracked them relentlessly, broadcasting their positions to advancing infantry. Within an hour, those groups were either wiped out or surrounded. Exhausted, terrified, and cut off, dozens of Russian troops threw down their weapons and raised their hands. By noon, nearly 300 Russian soldiers had surrendered. The Ukrainian flag was raised again over the ruins of the base. The guerrilla raids had weakened the enemy, the drone swarm had shattered them, and now the ground forces had finished the hunt. For Ukraine, this was more than just reclaiming territory. It was proof that intelligence, persistence, and precision could humble a force that once seemed invincible. The final tactics to complete the recapture of this territory will be revealed shortly. At dawn on August 15, 2025, the silence over the reclaimed Ukrainian base near Sambir was broken by a new threat. Radar operators picked up the fast-moving signatures of 10 Russian fighter jets approaching from the east. Flying at nearly 600 miles per hour, these Su-34s and Su-35s carried a deadly payload of guided bombs, each with enough destructive power to level entire buildings. Moscow's plan was clear: erase the base and avenge the humiliation of defeat. Sirens wailed across the Ukrainian positions. Soldiers scrambled into bunkers as the jets roared closer, their silhouettes cutting across the orange sky. At 15 miles out, the Russian pilots armed their bombs and prepared for a precision strike. For a brief moment, it seemed inevitable that the Ukrainian victory would be buried under tons of explosives. But what the Russians did not know was that Ukraine had anticipated this counterstrike. During the night, mobile batteries of the Patriot PAC-3 system had been redeployed near the base. As the Russian jets entered the kill zone, Ukrainian commanders gave the order. From hidden launchers, 7 Patriot missiles tore into the sky, their exhaust flames painting white streaks against the morning light. In seconds, they locked onto their targets. One by one, explosions erupted in the heavens. A Su-34 disintegrated into a fireball at 20,000 feet. Another jet, struck through its wing, spiraled downward before smashing into the forest below. Within less than 2 minutes, 7 Russian aircraft were destroyed. The remaining 3 jets tried to press on, but panic spread among the pilots. One aircraft took a near miss, shrapnel ripping across its fuselage. Warning alarms blared in the cockpits, fuel lines leaking, radar screens flickering with electronic interference. The pilots aborted the mission, jettisoned their bombs into empty fields, and turned back toward Russian airspace. On the ground, Ukrainian troops erupted in cheers. The Patriot crews, calm and disciplined, simply reloaded, knowing more strikes might come. For Russia, however, the result was catastrophic. Not just the loss of advanced jets worth hundreds of millions of dollars, but the shattering of their aura of air superiority. In less than 72 hours, Russia had gone from attacker to humiliated aggressor. Ukraine had defended, outmaneuvered, and counterattacked with precision, proving to the world that even a superpower could be defeated by intelligence, courage, and adaptability. The battle for Western Ukraine in August 2025 will be remembered not only for its scale, but for its symbolism. Russia had thrown its weight against a single Ukrainian base near Sambir, deploying waves of drones, ballistic missiles, and finally modern fighter jets. Yet at every stage, the assault was broken. First by interceptors and Patriots, then by guerrilla raids, and finally by an ingenious counteroffensive that blended cheap technology with unshakable willpower. What began as a desperate defense became a lesson in modern warfare. Ukraine showed that victory is not always measured by massive armies or expensive weapons. Sometimes, it comes from small squads striking at the right moment, from drones built in workshops within a day, from the courage to risk everything even when the odds seem impossible. For Russia, the campaign ended in humiliation, wrecked bases, shattered morale, and fighter jets falling from the sky. For Ukraine, it was proof that intelligence, discipline, and adaptability could turn weakness into strength. As the smoke cleared, one truth stood unshakable. Ukraine was no longer merely surviving. It was rewriting the art of war. Your support means everything. Subscribe now and stay with us as we bring you the frontline stories the world needs to hear.